My 34M fiancé is attracted to my stepbrother, 18M. I'm worried. What should I do? My stepbrother Tim, 18 male, has been part of my family since he was a little boy. I, 33 female, am obviously quite a bit older than him, but we have always been very close. Even though we aren't related by blood, he's always been my little brother. I have been with my fiancé Mike, 34 male, for 10 years, so he knows Tim very well and he has always been very fond of him. They have always spent time together joking and playing around, so that's not weird. I have always thought Mike saw Tim as a little brother. Tim has always been a sweet, bubbly type of kid. He's very friendly and affectionate. He went through a period when he was around 16 when he seemed quite sad and withdrawn. Then when he was 17, he came out as bisexual, and he seemed much happier and more confident once he opened up. Lately he has been back to his usual self. I've noticed he can be quite flirty with certain people, usually my friends. I don't think he means anything by it, it seems like he just finds it fun and enjoys getting some attention. He's a very good-looking boy and people tend to flirt back. I've had to tell off a few of my friends, but there's only been one occasion when someone has been seriously out of line. I had to cut out one of my female friends entirely. Tim doesn't direct his flintiness at Mike. However, over the last few months I've noticed Mike tends to involve himself when Tim is having those kinds of interactions with someone else. It wasn't blatant enough to say for sure it was intentional, but it was enough that I noticed and started being more watchful. Since then, I've noticed other things. Mike can be quite physical with Tim, hugging him, ruffling his hair, tickling him. That wasn't unusual when Tim was younger, but he's 18 now and it seems slightly out of place. Mike has asked him some really personal questions about sex, then acted like he was just kidding around to embarrass Tim when I told him to cut it out, edited to add. A commenter elsewhere suggested I should include an example of what he asks in my main post. He has asked Tim how he masturbates or what he thinks about when he's doing it. To me that's totally inappropriate. Then recently there have been two separate occasions when I've noticed Mike browsing Tim's Instagram, which has a lot of photos of him, then he seemed guilty when he saw I was there. I know it doesn't sound like much, but I get such a strange vibe from Mike when he's around Tim and I can't ignore it. Am I going crazy? I feel so uncomfortable about this. The fact that my fiancé might be attracted to someone else is one part of it, but I am more worried by the fact it's my little brother who's still practically a kid. Part of me thinks/hopes I might be imagining things because of what happened with the friend I cut out, but I'm just not sure. What can I do? If I ask Mike about this, he's going to go ballistic regardless of whether or not it's true. I know Tim wouldn't dream of doing anything with him and I'm confident he'd tell me if Mike was inappropriate, edited to add. I didn't make this clear, but Mike has never given any indication that he's interested in men. Update 1. My fiancé, M34, is being inappropriate towards my little stepbrother, M18, and I think our relationship is over after the events of previous post. Then we all spent Christmas Day together. To cut a long story short, we had a huge argument which led me to believe my suspicions were correct and we are not currently on speaking terms. I'm staying with family, but they are unaware of the whole story. I'll try not to make this unnecessarily complicated. Please ask if anything is unclear. I didn't have a chance to speak to anyone in my family about my concerns before we all spent Christmas together and it didn't seem like it would be appropriate timing anyway. Mike and I were due to spend the day at my mom and stepdad's home. My Tim still lives there full time. We live nearby, so we didn't stay over. My mom mentioned the day before that Tim was inviting a friend whose family doesn't celebrate. That isn't an unusual situation, so I didn't think anything of it. When Mike and I arrived, Tim's friend was already there. They were both very friendly and polite. Then after a while they went to play video games together in the main seating area. It was quite obvious they either liked each other or were already dating. They were awkwardly flirting with each other and holding hands when they thought no one was looking. Everyone, apart from Mike, thought it was cute. Mike was extremely quiet and snappy for more or less the entire time we were there. He was drinking more than usual. I was driving, so I didn't drink at all, and my parents only had a drink or two, so it stood out. He snapped at me when I asked what was wrong and when I suggested he slow down. It was very uncomfortable. My mum and Tim were both getting anxious. Tim's friend seemed confused. My stepdad was obviously losing patience with Mike's behavior. We ended up leaving right after dinner because I was so uncomfortable, and he was silent the whole journey home. When we got back, I asked him what the hell his problem was. I don't remember precisely what was said, so I'm mostly paraphrasing. He said he guessed that he was the only one who noticed what a rude little shit Tim was being and that he ignored everyone and spent the whole day making out with his friend. He used a very aggressive tone of voice and sarcastic air quotes when he said, "friend." I told him that was totally untrue, and even if it wasn't, I couldn't understand why he would be so irate about my little brother paying more attention to his friend than him. I asked him why he's been so weird about Tim, but I made absolutely no reference to the specific concerns I've been having. Mike completely lost his temper and said, "Are you saying you think I want your little brother, or something similar?" It was a bizarre outburst, and he said some very unpleasant, graphic things which he decided I was accusing him of. This was unprompted by me, and I don't see how he would have jumped straight to that conclusion unless there was an element of truth to it. I don't remember exactly what I said in response. I didn't really challenge him, and I told him he was scaring me. He went to the spare room and slammed the door. I drove back to my parents' place and told them we had had a fight. I've been staying there since. I told Mike we need to talk, and he said, "I agree, but he's barely been in contact and hasn't responded to any of my suggestions of when we could talk. I have no idea what's happening. The MY family are obviously aware something is wrong, but I haven't fully explained it and I don't know how. They have noticed it is directed at Tim, but they seem to think it's due to homophobia rather than anything else. Tim is upset and worried. I really don't know how honest I should be with him. I don't even know for sure what Mike's issue is. I've told him he's done nothing wrong and it's Mike's problem. Obviously, Mike and I haven't made any decision about our relationship because we've barely spoken. It doesn't look positive. I don't know if I could feel the same about him after how he's behaved. His strange behavior around Tim is also one of several things I've been worried about, and his outburst scared me no matter what caused it. I don't know what the hell to do. I'm open to suggestions. Thanks. Edit. I'm not sure where to start as I wasn't expecting anywhere near this many comments, but I wanted to address some of the points being raised. I know I've been sent some private messages, but I can't read them without using the app, and I'm paranoid that if I use the app it will link this to my main account. A lot of people suggested Mike may have harmed Tim in some way when he was younger. I can't say for sure, I haven't asked Tim. Obviously I don't want to believe that could have happened, but I realize even people we love and trust can sometimes be capable of doing awful things. I never had any concerns about how Mike acted when Tim was younger. There were also a lot of things going on for Tim that we are already aware of that explain why he was sad and withdrawn. I've never had any impression before now that Mike was confused about his sexuality. If that's something he's struggling with, it's possible that that's what's causing him to lash out. I've also never known him to be homophobic, but I can't 100% rule that out as a possibility either. As bad as it sounds, homophobia would be preferable to the alternatives. I posted this as a comment, but I'll add it here. When I say Tim is flirty, I don't mean he's sexually inappropriate in any way. He's an awkward teenage boy. It's mainly things like expressions and body language. It's obvious because he's not very good at it. It's normal for teenagers to act like that at times. It doesn't bother me too much if people think it's funny or cute, but grown adults should be able to restrain themselves around a teenage boy batting his eyelashes at them, not literally, but hopefully you get my point. If he crossed any lines or did anything to make someone uncomfortable or himself unsafe, obviously, I would speak to him about that, but to my knowledge he's never come close. I will talk to my parents and Tim today. I just need to figure out what to say. I agree that honesty is best. I'll look into legal advice on how to move forward with Mike. Obviously, we aren't yet married, we don't have kids, pets or a mortgage. We do have a shared tenancy and a joint account for bills, but that's it. I don't think the relationship has a future regardless of where his anger is coming from. I still want to speak to him though. Update 2. Update after talking to Mike. I received a text from Mike saying he wants to talk but wants to explain in writing first to allow him to express himself calmly. He said, "I know what you think this is and I understand why, but I promise it's not like that." He then told me he sent an email and asked me to read it before speaking. I'm paraphrasing because it was a long personal email. He said he experienced confusion about his sexuality when he was a little younger than Tim is now. It went badly, a close friendship ended, and he ended up never addressing those feelings and ignoring that part of himself. Tim coming out brought out a lot of confusing feelings. He admitted that he did initially believe he was attracted to Tim / jealous of people Tim was interested in. He admitted he did think about him sexually. He said he never would have acted in this, and he was disgusted with himself for thinking that way, which caused even more difficult feelings. He said he now realizes that he is envious because he regrets never exploring when he was Tim's age, and seeing him now makes him feel bitter, especially seeing him with his friend / boyfriend. He apologized for his behavior and for lashing out the way he did, and he said he hopes we can talk that I haven't replied. I do plan to talk to him. I have a lot of questions. His explanation makes sense in some ways, but I don't know if I'm comfortable with it. It doesn't change the angry outbursts or the fact that he thought about my little brother sexually. I don't know if that's something I can accept and move on from. He asked me not to speak to my parents or Tim before speaking to him first. I haven't said yes or no. I understand why he's asking, but I feel like I need Tim's perspective. Update 3. Another update after speaking to Tim. I spoke to my little brother last night. He actually came to me rather than the other way around. I feel bad for that because it shouldn't have been his responsibility. I was trying to figure out what to say. He was just asking if I was okay after arguing with Mike. Obviously it's not usual for me to stay with my parents. However, I got the impression there were things he was holding back. I apologized for Mike's behavior at Christmas, and I asked him if he'd noticed Mike behaving strangely or making him uncomfortable before now. He said yes, he thinks Mike has been acting differently around him since he came out. He mentioned the very intrusive personal questions as an example, and I agreed that it was completely inappropriate for Mike to talk to him like that. He said he didn't want to make a big thing of it because he knows some straight people get overly curious. He didn't seem fully convinced by that. I told him I was very concerned about how Mike was speaking to him and behaving around him, and I asked him if he'd done or said anything else to make him uncomfortable. He said there was nothing big, and he didn't want to imagine Mike would ever do that or view him in that way. He said he has felt uncomfortable at times at things he said or the way he's been looking at him or talking to him, but he felt bad for feeling that way. I tried to reassure him that he's done nothing wrong and it's completely unacceptable for Mike to treat him that way and he isn't wrong to feel uncomfortable. I tried to encourage him to open up, but he didn't want to. I had no idea how much to tell him about what Mike said because I didn't want to upset or worry him. I told him Mike and I are no longer together, and I asked him to tell me if Mike tried to contact him in any way because I'm concerned about his behavior and his lack of respect for Tim's boundaries. I brought up social media to remind Tim to be cautious about his privacy settings and block Mike. I asked if Mike ever interacted with his social media, and he said no. I didn't want to bring up that I'd seen Mike looking at his Instagram because Tim was already upset and worried, but I thought the important thing was just to make sure he's safe for now. Tim kept apologizing. I tried my best to be reassuring that none of this is his fault. I'm furious with Mike for putting him through this. I asked him if he had anyone he feels comfortable talking to, and he mentioned the boy who he had over at Christmas. He confirmed they are dating. He said he's been very supportive, and he was concerned by how Mike was acting. That I don't feel like I've handled it well, but I hope he at least knows he can talk to me. My parents have gone away for the weekend, so I haven't discussed it with them yet. Update 4. The situation is far from being fully resolved, but this will be my last update. I wanted to make a final post because I received so much advice and supportive comments which I was grateful for. It has been a very confusing and difficult time. After he'd had a little time to process what we had already discussed, I asked if we could talk more and he agreed. To keep it brief, he is now aware of everything I have discussed in my post and my updates. My mom and stepdad are also aware. It was an extremely difficult conversation. Tim is confused and hurt. Our parents are understandably furious. I had expected them to be angry with me for putting Tim at risk, but fortunately they weren't, at least not outwardly. Everyone is feeling a lot of guilt. Tim is blaming himself regardless of how much we reassure him. My parents and I are blaming ourselves for not recognizing what was happening. Tim was adamant that Mike hadn't done anything else that we aren't already aware of. However, the way he expressed this was by saying things like, "It was nothing serious," or "It was stupid really." He admitted that there were multiple occasions that he felt uncomfortable because Mike got far too close, was looking at him very intently, or put his hand on his leg or touched his face. He said it felt very uncomfortable, but he didn't think it was enough to be certain that he was being inappropriate. I have ended my relationship with Mike. Initially he was calm and said he understood. However, I've since had to clearly explain that I am not the right person to provide him with emotional support right now. I gave him a couple of suggestions of people or services he could speak to, and I have now blocked him. Where possible, I'm hoping to deal with practical matters like our tenancy through a third party. I want as little contact with him as possible. I haven't thought about what to say to mutual friends. However, my closest friends are people I met through work who don't know them well, so I won't be isolated. That's about all I can say. I appreciate the advice and support I received. New update. I am posting because I'm desperate for advice on how I can support my brother. To be clear, he is now accessing therapy from a trained professional. I'm just looking for advice on how I might approach repairing our personal relationship, which has definitely been damaged. The main issue is that my brother blames himself for Mike's behavior, and any time we spend time together he winds up getting upset and apologizing. He is trying his best to appear like everything is fine, but he is not his normal self, and he is avoiding people when he is normally very social. I desperately want him to feel comfortable around me again, but I don't know how to encourage this. If anyone has any suggestions of things I can try, please let me know.